Inter comes straight from Latin. In English, it has various meanings. All of them can be expressed broadly as between, but they're still quite distinct: moving between, intercity, communicating between, intercom, coming between, intercept, and so on. No wonder so many English words begin with inter dash. Intercede: 1. To act as a go-between between unfriendly parties. 2. To beg or plead in behalf of another. He had interceded for her with their boss on one important occasion, for which she was still grateful. The Latin cedere means to go, so go-between is the most literal meaning of intercede. The same seed root can also be seen in such words as precede and succeed. If you've been blamed unfairly for something, a friend may intercede on your behalf with your coach or teacher. More often, it will be the coach or teacher who has to intercede in a student dispute. The intercession of foreign governments has sometimes prevented conflicts from becoming worse than they otherwise would have. Interstice: a little space between two things, chink, crevice. All the interstices between the rocks have been filled with new cement, and the wall should be fine for another 100 years. People often speak of interstices in the physical sense, referring to the interstices in surfaces, for example, or microscopic interstices between particles in chemical compounds, but also often in a less literal way, the interstices in a movie's plot, in the economy, in what's covered by a complicated tax law, etc. The pronunciation of interstice is slightly unusual. You might not guess that it's accented on the second syllable. This is also true in the plural interstices, which is used more often than the singular form. Note also that in interstices the final e is usually pronounced long, so that it rhymes with bees. Interdict: 1. To prohibit or forbid. 2. To destroy, damage, or cut off, as an enemy line of supply, by firepower, to stop or hamper an enemy. All weapons trade with the country had been interdicted by the NATO alliance, and ships were actually being stopped and searched before being allowed to dock. Interdict and interdiction are used for very serious prohibitions, more serious than, say, a professor telling the class that texting is forbidden during lectures. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, an interdict was a sentence imposed by the powerful Catholic Church forbidding a person or place, and sometimes even an entire country, from receiving church privileges or participating in church functions. Interdict now often means cut off in a physically forceful way as well. Interdictions are usually targeted at either arms supplies or illegal drug shipments. Interpolate: to put something between other things or parts, especially to put words into a piece of writing or a conversation. On page 6, she noticed that someone had interpolated a couple of sentences that completely altered the meaning of her original text. The meaning of interpolate is often entirely innocent. An interpolation in a text may have been approved by everyone concerned, and an interpolation in conversation is usually just an interruption. But in its older meaning, interpolating usually meant tampering with a text secretly to change its apparent meaning. Legislators are sometimes enraged to discover what someone has quietly interpolated into their favorite bill at the last minute. And any contract always has to be read carefully to make sure the other lawyer didn't slip in an undesirable interpolation. Sur is actually a shortening of the Latin prefix super, dash, meaning over, above, see super, and has the same meaning. A surface is the face above or on the outside of something. A surplus is something above and beyond what is needed. And to survey a landscape is to look out over it. Surmount: to rise above, overcome. The story of how he surmounted poverty and crippling physical ailments to achieve what he achieved is almost unbelievable. Our verb mount, meaning ascend, get up onto, comes from the same Latin root as mountain, and we keep those images in mind when using surmount, since climbing up or over a mountain is a symbol of achievement. The word almost always refers to human effort, and almost always in a positive way. Thus, we speak of surmounting difficulties, surmounting problems, surmounting hurdles, surmounting handicaps. You get the idea. Surcharge: an additional tax or charge. Checking the bill, she discovered 2 surcharges that no one had warned her about. The Arab oil embargo of 1973 led airlines to add fuel surcharges to their passenger fares that were large enough to discourage air travel. Surcharges are usually added for special service. When you request a rush job from a service supplier, it will probably bring a surcharge along with it. A particularly difficult phone installation may carry a surcharge. An extra large fine for a speeding offense after you've already had too many tickets could be called a surcharge. An added tax may be called a surcharge or surtax when it only affects people with incomes above a certain level. And if those low prices that show up in really big letters in ads for all kinds of services turn out to be misleading, it's probably because they don't include a bunch of surcharges that you won't find out about till later. Surfeit, a supply that is more than enough, excess. Whenever he glanced into his daughter's room, he was always astonished at the utter surfeit of things: dolls, dollhouses, stuffed animals, cushions, games, posters, and clothing strewn everywhere. Book and film critics often use surfeit when complaining about how an author or director has given us too much of something. In our consumer society, we're always noticing a surfeit of one thing or another, such as breakfast cereals in the supermarket. Statistics are always indicating a surfeit of lawyers or doctors or accountants in some parts of the country and a lack of them in others. The death of a young star always results in a surfeit of articles and books about him or her. And a potluck supper usually results in a surfeit of food, which might leave you surfeited or stuffed. Surreal, very strange or unusual, having the quality of a dream. In a surreal sequence, the main character gets a job on floor 7.5, which turns out to be only half as high as the other floors, so everyone must walk around stooped over. In 1924, a group of European poets, painters, and filmmakers founded a movement that they called Surrealism. Their central idea was that the unconscious mind, a concept Sigmund Freud had recently made famous, was the source of all imagination, and that art should try to express its contents. The unconscious, they believed, revealed itself most clearly in dreams. The Surrealist painters included René Magritte, Joan Miró, and Salvador Dali, whose limp watches painting became the best-known Surrealist image of all. Since those years, we've used surreal to describe all kinds of situations that strike us as dreamlike. And even though the Surrealist movement ended long ago, Surrealism now seems to be everywhere, not just in painting, literature, and movies, but also in blogs, video games, and graphic novels.